Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out the radio version of the show every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 in Atlanta. We also air on a podcasting network in Los Angeles called the 405 Media. There's a TV version of the show that airs on KMVT 15 in Silicon Valley at 8 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. Both versions of the show air in other states. For these show times, plus past episodes, please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com. Join me at the 10th Annual Media Excellence Awards on January 18th in Beverly Hills, California. The attendees and I will be celebrating innovation and leadership in technology and entertainment. There are 20 award categories with 1,000 nominees. These awards honor those who are creating groundbreaking technology to better our lives and celebrate the hard work, determination, and brilliance in the leadership within the companies which create the new world we live in today. I will be recording nominees and winners at the awards. For tickets and more information, go to MediaXAwards.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Dr. Sean Wise. He's the professor of entrepreneurship at Ryerson University. He's also a partner at Ryerson Futures as a seed investor, a best-selling author, and he helped launch Dragon's Den along with tons of other stuff. And for people that haven't heard of Dragon's Den, it's basically the Canadian version of Shark Tank. So Dr. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm actually really pumped to have you on the show. I've kind of followed your career and kind of known who you are because you're kind of a huge name in the tech industry kind of globally, and then as obviously is well known in Canada for your work on tons of things. But maybe before we kind of dive into all of that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a large, multicultural, diverse urban center
That's awesome.
called Toronto, north of the border. It's a lot like Chicago or New York, just a lot cleaner, a lot safer, and has a lot more variety of food.
Sure. Interesting. Okay. Sure. So you've done, obviously you're a doctor. So walk us through your kind of education career, because you've done a ton of stuff and I think it's kind of fascinating. So walk us through that.
Okay, so I went to school to study aerospace engineering at a school in Ottawa called Carleton.
What made you want to go into that, just out of curiosity?
Star Trek.
Sure, fair enough.
Star Trek.
Awesome.
I knew I could never be a pilot. I thought maybe I could do something else in the field, and that would get me sort of closer to space travel one day if we ever went that direction. But in the end, my learning disabilities made it impossible for me to practice as an engineer. So I made a little U-turn, a pivot, if you will. And near my third year of engineering school, I left into law school. And I graduated law school with a law and MBA degree. My law degree was in corporate finance. My MBA degree was in entrepreneurship and finance. And I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm the son of two high school dropouts. I'm the son of two very successful entrepreneurs in the and I've always been taught from a very young age, if it's going to be, it's up to me, so be an entrepreneur. But I also knew that a profession, a technical background would make me a better entrepreneur. I knew that being a lawyer would make me a better person to do large deals. And very early on, I got exposed to venture capital, and I left my practice of law, and I went to go work in the VC world, and I worked for a company called Spencer Trask, and they're most famous for Mr. Spencer Trask, who was the original angel investor on Thomas Edison's light bulb and one of the original founders of General Electric Edison. So for a number of years, I worked as a seed VC underneath their leadership. And when my billionaire boss became a millionaire in the crash of 2008, I decided to come back north of the border and give my parents what they really wanted, which was grandchildren. While doing that, I accepted a job at the university. Ryerson University is sort of like the Babson or Stanford of the North.
Sure.
It's very hands-on. It's very experiential based. Yeah, most of the profs have PhDs, but they also have years of experience. You don't go to Ryerson to teach entrepreneurship if you've never had your own startup. So I've had my own businesses all throughout my education. By the time I became a VC, I already have 5 or 6 companies under my own belt. So I've been an operator. Working as a VC in a seed capacity was fabulous. But when I returned home, I took a post with this university that allowed me to teach the next generation. The university has its own small seed fund. I help out there whenever I can. And so I keep in contact with a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I'm very excited every day to go into work, whether it be teaching or whether it be mentoring or whether it be working on something like Dragon's Den, which in the States they call Shark Tank. It's funny because people don't realize that Shark Tank is one of 27 versions of that show, that the show dates back to Money No Toro in the late 90s on Sony in Japan. And so and they also don't realize that half of that panel is Canadian. Yeah. But putting
and
that
they were
aside,
on Dragon's Den, right? Like half the guys on Shark Tank today were on Dragon's Den.
Yeah, and or they were on Entourage, or they were on something else where they proved they could do good television. But I spent 5 seasons working with them before getting my own show on the Oprah Winfrey Network Canada, where I just sit down and basically go like you are, one-on-one with a famous entrepreneur, and try to help my students understand that it's not an easy road to follow.
Sure. No, I think that's really great. And I want to kind of dive into kind of your latest book, Startup Opportunities, Know When to Quit Your Day Job. And you've written a ton of other books. And if people just, basically Google you, they'll get your Wikipedia page and tons of other stuff. And you just go to Amazon and type in, Sean Wise, you're going to get all your books. But I really want to kind of dive into that book and why you decided to kind of write that.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Yeah, I have a very unique name. Dr. Wise, it sounds like a supervillain. So it's really easy to Google me.
Awesome.
My Amazon page is really, and some of my students and investments would probably agree with that theory. But this book was really a necessity for me. So I'm very blessed every day to meet entrepreneurs. And I'm very blessed that they want to tell me their pitch, no matter whether it's in a room or a restaurant with my wife, that people come up to me and share their ideas. And I feel bad because in 5 minutes, I can't tell you that your life dream is good or bad. It doesn't work that way. But more importantly, in the 21st century, it's no longer the venture capitalists or the investors that make entrepreneurs successful. It's the customers. So it's not my opinion you should be getting. It's the opinion of your customers. And all of this came to a head when I had the opportunity to interview on my show Brad Feld. Now, Brad Feld makes what I do, look like small chump change, and it is comparatively. And Brad is a mensch of a guy, a super smart guy, a super nice guy, and he's had half a dozen unicorn exits, plus $1 billion, Fitbit being one of the last ones. And he is talking, and we were both frustrated, not because people ask us while we're peeing for opinion on their business, but because we can't actually answer to them in a full, and that bothers us. And yet, if I get 100 pitches, he gets 1,000. So we said, what if we took a book and put everything we would want them to know ahead of time? Could we help people start less stupid startups? Or more importantly, could we give the book to people who asked us, not to sell it, like not to try to go, just read my book, not to make the $9 that we're going to make from the book, but to help people to walk away with more than just an answer. Because most entrepreneurs, when they're faced with negative feedback, it's hard to take it. And most entrepreneurs, when they're faced with positive feedback, just want more. But what you really want to understand is what's behind that. Brad's, had hundreds of investments. I've had dozens of investments. And we're trying to explain in 5 minutes or less at dinner so I can go back to my wife's attention, what's wrong with their online bookstore.
Sure.
So we wrote the book as a, I hate to say it like this, but a gift to every entrepreneur who's ever wondered, should I quit my job for this idea? We wrote this book so less spouses would be crying that they didn't know that this was worthwhile doing or they shouldn't have done it ahead of time. Sure. On Dragon's Den, on Shark Tank, it kills me to see people who are pursuing categorically terrible ideas in the wrong way and spending their children's inheritance, spending their retirement, mortgaging the house, selling the children to science. It breaks my heart because their efforts are needed. They're just needed to be in a better way. And I'm not saying that means I can pick winners or not. I don't want you to think that, Kevin. I cannot. I'm saying that people should be working with their customers. People should be getting key shareholder opinions, not investor opinions. And not enough people have got that memo.
Interesting.
And so this book is all about people on the cusp, or even those who've taken the jump, to know why they're not getting investors to call them back, or why they're not getting the feedback. Because, we might hear 100 pitches, but there's one. But I don't have enough time to tell the 99 I don't invest my 2 cents.
Sure.
So, we wrote this book for ourselves, literally, to stop people from coming for bad advice.
No, I think that's really, really good. And obviously, I think it's something that, at least in my experience, nobody's really, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's not a lot of people like the two of you that are willing to openly talk about this stuff, right? Because so many people are like, if you don't quit your job day one, you're never going to be successful. And it's like, well, that's not true really in any way, shape, or form. And it also, to your point, like, if you're going to mortgage or bankrupt yourself trying to chase an idea, like, that's so crazy in my opinion, right?
I understand the concept of, if you burn the ships when you land on the new continent, everyone won't think about going home. I get that.
Sure.
But when the cost to launch a startup has dropped from $5 million to $500,000 to $50,000 to less than $5,000, you would be idiotic to quit your job, the thing that's paying for your family, before you've tested that people actually agree there's a problem. People actually agree your solution, if built, would work. That's why Kickstarter is so great, right? Don't build a factory to prove that no one wants pink watches. Put one up on Kickstarter and let people pay for it in advance. If we can shrink the distance between customers and innovators, then we will only increase the number of successful ventures we launch.
No, that's actually really good advice. How do you, though, like, what are the first steps that people should kind of consider when they're thinking about, like, do I do this full time? Like, how far along should they kind of be? And I don't mean in a time frame, but, like, should you be kind of starting to make some money? Should you kind of be pre-revenue? Like, what do you kind of see all?
So there is no one answer fits all. I like people to have revenue before they say they burn, they get the insurance money, before they do all of the things that they can do to keep it afloat.
Sure.
But you can get early evidence. So you're looking at like a binary decision that one day you're going to wake up and know you should quit. I'm suggesting it's more of a continuum that deals more with your own comfort. So I wouldn't quit my job before I went and spoke to 100 customers for 1 hour each, face to face.
Okay.
I wouldn't quit my job before I found a solution that was exponentially better than the market alternative. I wouldn't quit my job until someone had bought at least one unit, or I'd at least fake sold one unit before I'd even built it. But that's me, because that's my risk profile, right?
Okay.
I'm not talking about, you got to release Google and then figure out the revenue model after. I'm talking about for the majority of us out there, who are working day to day to create something new that isn't world changing, a small business person as opposed to a super startup entrepreneur. But even if you're a super startup entrepreneur, you're doing yourself a disservice to go all in before you have arm's length external evidence. Because you can't trust yourself. You love the idea. You wouldn't be doing it if you weren't obsessed with the problem. You wouldn't be doing it if you weren't trying to help yourself solve that problem. You wouldn't be doing it if you didn't think it was worthwhile doing. But that same entrepreneurial bias clouds your decision making like the dark side and the emperor. It makes you only see certain things. And you have to lift that veil of the dark side so that you can make an honest decision for yourself, for your future, and for your past, right? Because everybody shares the pain when an entrepreneur fails. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to make a startup. So, I think you shouldn't quit. You shouldn't cash out your retirement funds until you have sufficient external, objective evidence that what you're doing makes sense, adds value, right?
Sure.
Google knew that sorting the internet automatically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 60 minutes every hour, 60 seconds every minute was valuable.
Sure.
They didn't know how they were going to monetize it, but they knew it was valuable because the human mind can't do that, right? Before Google, a lot of these searches were hand done. We'll figure out the best 100 sites and we'll put them under each. Librarians are outdated because of Google.
Yep.
Because it took it to another level. So even if you're doing Google, I would have still, I'm not them, so I'm not suggesting I could look back and tell them how to do better. But did they walk around and go, hey, are you also having trouble finding things on the internet? Or did they say, hey, how many sites a day are getting created? How could any human come up with that? What else other than your own passion, obsession, desire is proving to you that this is worth the risk?
Sure. No, I 100% agree. And the thing that I think I want to kind of get your thoughts on and just kind of reiterate is like Google still makes majority of their revenue off of kind of ad sales, basically, right? They're in so many other verticals now. So they still haven't figured out how to really move a lot of their revenue to other ventures. They're working on it heavily.
So I would disagree with you, Kevin.
Really?
I would disagree with you. I don't disagree with your conclusion. I think Google has found other applications for the idea of sorting and collecting and sifting through large data streams. Sure, and whether that's videos on YouTube or whether that's Google searches, they're doing that. Now, on the fringes of that, there's some crazy stuff, right? Like the floating internet bubbles and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I would be hard-pressed to say that Google isn't in the right balance because it hasn't been able to duplicate the value transfer it duplicated to the 6 billion people on this planet when it indexed the internet.
Sure, that's fair. Okay.
So, but putting that aside, what's the question?
Well, no, I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that because, right? But and just kind of getting you to the point where it's like Google did this, astronomical, huge task, and they're still kind of riding that kind of revenue and using that, and basically they're still trying to figure out how to monetize some of these other markets, right? Because they're not making nowhere near what they're doing off ad sales and anything else. Okay,
Twitter's a better example, right? Because Twitter went public, got big, did all these things.
Sure.
Before it even had product market fit. And I think that that's the real benefit you have in 2017. It's been 20 years since the dot-com boom started. We've had the dot-com boom, we've had Web 2.0, and now we're in the so-called age of unicorns, right? But that's just a cohort of startups that were trying to disrupt businesses through the internet. So by seeing these thousands and thousands of startups and studying them, we're able to map how do you go from where do I get my idea from to product market fit? How do you go from I have an idea to I've broken even to I'm profitable? And we've been able to map it. And if you look at the work of Bill Aulett at MIT, Steve Blank at Stanford, Eric Ries at Harvard, and even my own small contributions to this process, we have tried to map the road. And so we know you start with problem solution fit. And we know that problem solution fit is made up of a bunch of little steps. And we know once you find problem solution fit, you can then raise a little bit of seed money and start growing your channels and find adjacent markets. And we know, not because I'm so smart, but because you can reverse engineer things like Uber and Google and Twitter and Tinder and Flickr from all of these cohorts and start to piece together strategies. I'm not the genius who came up with get out of the building, put customers first. That's my professor, Steve Blank, right? And so that was very different. You never heard that in 1996. When I went to MBA school in the early 90s and I wanted to learn more about entrepreneurship, they gave me like Benjamin Franklin philosophy.
Okay, interesting.
There was no lean startup. There was no customer development focus. These are new tools. So if you're going to quit your job, number one, you should be familiar with these tools. Number two, you should be using them already because this is the process by which you get the evidence, which gives you the confidence to double down, to quit your job, to do that. Or if you're already in a startup and you're like, I don't know what to do next, or I don't know why people aren't buying what I'm selling, these processes have proven to be mostly universal. Not
Sure.
all startups can be lean startups, okay? Pharmaceutical drug company startups are not likely to be lean, and that's okay. But for the
Yep.
majority of us who want to dream about having a company worth 10, 20, 30 million dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, there's a process. And if you're
Sure.
not following it, then or at least aware of it, then you're doing yourself a huge disservice.
No, I 100% agree with you, right? And you can build a really good business even if your revenue is only a couple $1,000,000 a year, right? Like based on what you're trying to do. Like, and I think the other thing that I find kind of interesting is just how I think there's so much misinformation kind of out there and stuff kind of coming out of the valley sometimes where that stuff doesn't even happen in the valley. And so I think like a book like you guys wrote really kind of tells the truth for kind of maybe a lack of a better term for that, right? And at least gives people some stuff to kind of think about when they're actually considering making a huge life choice like quitting their job to pursue their kind of startup.
And that's what Brad and I wrote it for. That
Sure.
was our hope. Our hope was to have one less sorry, sad story of someone who's bankrupt. Our hope was to have someone who's on a startup cut out a month of time, cut out a week of time, figure out a new technique. I don't know that what I wrote is truth in the objective sense. It's my
Okay.
truth. It's the
Sure.
experience I've had listening to 20,000 plus pitches. It's the experience Brad has had listening to those pitches. It's our truth. We find it to be coherent with what our peers and colleagues say. But you know what?
Sure.
People have to find that out for themselves, especially in an era where people talk about things like adjacent truths and alternate truths and fake news and Trump presidencies. You have to know the context of where you're getting your information from. And that's
Sure.
what we're trying to give.
Sure.
I can
No, I
pick
think
a
that's
stuff,
really
you
good.
know, and
Go
I
ahead,
think it's
sorry.
I think it's also you've hit another point, which is why do you have to be $1 billion startup? How about starting with the dream of being sustainable, making more money than you spend? It's a
Sure.
small dream. How
Sure.
about the dream that I want to look after my family, or I want to be independent, or I want to have a side hustle, and maybe it's only going to make $500,000 a year. But if you're the only employee, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, and
Right?
you
Not
take home
every-
even you take home half of that or a quarter of that or something, right? Plus your job.
that's
Like
part
that's
of the
not
book.
bad.
And
Sure.
that's part of the book because Brad, through his investment and support of Techstars, is in 20 different markets. So
Sure.
he sees people and he sees them struggling to get the evidence they need. He sees them taking leaps without the proper analysis. And I feel similar. I got tired of listening on Shark Tank to everybody crying and saying, if we don't get this investment, it's over. You should never put yourself in that position.
Sure.
The only people who want you to go all in are the people who will benefit if you win, not the ones who have to live with you every day, not the ones that have to see you go through this. Listen, I'm all for huge exits. Nothing would please me more than if
Sure.
more of my investments had huge exits. But you know what? Not every business needs to have venture capital. Not every business needs to be hunting $1 billion exit. If you're the only investor in your business, a sale of that business for $3 million could be life-changing.
Totally. It could be enough to retire, right? Or at least live comfortably.
Live comfortably. So that's what the book's about. That's if I'm sitting on a beach and I want to know, what should I be thinking about to come up with my great idea? You're going to be a little disappointed because it's not really about ideas. It's about how you test those ideas, how you think about those ideas, how you validate those ideas. It's not really like there's a secret formula. The
Sure.
idea that wins is the one that's adopted fastest by the customer. And the one that's adopted fastest by the customer typically is marketed well, but also adds exponential value to the end user.
Sure.
Right? And
no,
so
I
people need to
100%
think about it. People need to think about it that way.
Well, I'm also curious though, like I've worked at a startup now, and I've worked at them in the past, and what I found works really, really well is you launch as quick as possible, get people using the platform, get their feedback, and start actually incorporating that feedback because they feel like they're building the product with you, and that builds so much loyalty. Have you found that as well kind of worked in different startups that you've been involved in?
Absolutely. Those that have the richest user community tend to innovate fastest, and they tend to find product market fit much faster because they're getting input on a daily basis. I have never scientifically, but now maybe after this I will, tried to correlate the number of customer interactions a founder has over 5 years with the speed of success. But I can hypothesize that they're directly correlated, if not exponentially correlated, because the faster you get in front of potential customers, even when you have a platform built, I'm talking about draw it on a whiteboard and go show it to customers. I'm not even talking about coding it. I'm talking about don't go code something for 1,000 hours before you show the screenshots that you hacked up to them. Try to do it in increments. And by doing it in increments, what's going to happen is you're going to get direct feedback that may change your assumptions. Mm-hmm. But if your goal is to be successful, then who cares whether your software helps doctors, dentists, or veterinarians?
Yep.
Right? And that's where I think valuing the customer, even more than the idea itself, can be so important.
Sure. And like your day one, whatever day one is that you show it to a customer, whether it's a whiteboard drawing or kind of a first version of an app or website or web app, whatever it is, 6 months later or a year later, it's going to be so different if you actually listen to people that are actually using the platform. And I think that's what you're basically trying to get across, correct?
Correct. I'll also add to your point that you'll do it faster with less probability of failure.
Interesting.
So we actually, when I work with students trying to get them just open to entrepreneurship, we don't even wait for the whiteboard. We don't even, because that assumes you know what it looks like. We have them go and say, which customers do you care about? Which groups of customer segments are you a member of? Which groups of customer segments do you have access to? Because if you can't get access to early adopters, what does it matter?
Sure.
And so students might choose international students because they're on work visas or study visas. Right. And they'll go out then and see, tell me your top problems. And after 30 or 40 hours of face-to-face interviews, you will hear common themes. Sure. Those themes become the problem that you're trying to solve, as opposed to going and saying, here's the problem. Do you agree? Yes. Here's the solution. Would you buy it? That's almost way ahead. We do a program called 100 Steps to Startup, and you can find out 100stepstostartup.com. And it's literally like week one, what do you want to accomplish with your life? You know, what is the goal of your startup? Is your goal to have an exit? Is your goal to have revenue that sustains you? Is your goal to change how cancer is treated? What are you trying to accomplish? And from there, move through customer discovery. From there, move into problem confirmation, to move there into solution development. We map it out to 100 steps because students like to have little teeny bite-sized steps that everyone can accomplish. And so 100 steps probably takes 6 or 12 months. But the program is geared to first-time founders, whether they're students or people thinking of quitting their jobs. So we want them to read the book. And then once they figured out there's a great idea out there, the next question is how do I get the evidence? How do I start? How do I convert my idea? How do I protect my idea? How do I raise funding? And that's what we've done with 100 Steps to Startup. We've taken the great work by Arlette and Eric Ries and Steve Blank and tried to make it accessible to the 99% of people who aren't in Silicon Valley.
Sure. No, I think that's really good. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into 100 Steps in a second, but I really want your thoughts on, so when you're doing all this research and you have people saying, like, you know what, if you guys actually build this, I want to at least like test it for you or kind of be involved. Do you recommend people have paying kind of beta customers or alpha customers, or at what point do you try to get some sort of money from those types of people?
Assuming that you're talking about a B2C business, even a B2B business, earlier revenue is always better.
Okay.
I know people will argue, well, you're doing Facebook, you need the network effect. Agreed.
Okay.
I also think when you're showing people a cardboard with an image of what you want to do, it's a little early.
Sure.
But when they take the prototype that's made of gum and popsicle sticks and painted with crazy glue, and they say you can't take it with you after the test, then I know you have something. When people call you and say, is it ready yet? Then you have something. And if you manage their expectations, then by the time you answer, it's ready, but I need $9.99 for you a month, they're already in. Because like you suggested, collaborated with you all along the way. Don't build in secret. Build with your customer base. Build with your community. By definition, the first adopters will be innovators. Just look at, Rogers' curve. I mean, that's one of the things I love. I can take a PhD in entrepreneurship and apply it to real world stuff. So the stuff we're talking about isn't just theory. It's real. Like, this is how people do it. The best companies in my portfolio can't remove their prototype because the customer says, over my dead body.
Interesting.
Right? And it's similar. I mean, Paul Graham says it the same way. How do I know when you reach product market fit? I pull the plug on the server and I wait to see how long it takes for people to call and complain.
Interesting.
Right? They're all variations of the same thing. Build something that people need that's exponentially better and solves a problem exponentially more valuable. So it's 10 times cheaper, 10 times faster. That's why Google wins, because it's 10 times a librarian. That's why Wikipedia wins. It's 1/10 the cost of Encyclopedia Britannica and 100 times as broad. That's the things, if you're looking for that billion-dollar exit, you need to be focused on. But for the majority of the 99% of us who are just trying to build a business so we can have a job, make a living, go on vacation, still use those tools. You just need to use them more appropriately. And that's really at 100 Steps to Startup, what we're trying to accomplish. And really, Startup Opportunities is really helping those people who are wondering if today's the day.
No, I 100% agree. And so I want to get back into 100 Steps to Startup because I think it's actually really innovative and really cool. So do you kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of what's included and kind of a little bit of the flow of kind of what happens in the course or the program, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't like people failing, and I don't like people failing when they could have done better if only they had known some secret piece of information. So I went out and spent 5 years of my life trying to understand how founders get to $1 billion, how startups succeed, how small businesses succeed, by talking to VCs, by mapping my own. And I took some of that knowledge and tried to break it down into pieces that my sister would understand. And I love my sister. She's a college graduate, but she knows nothing about technology, nothing about startups, but she has an online jewelry business.
Okay.
And I don't know anything about the online jewelry business, but telling her to go talk to her customers was a revelation. And telling her to stop writing her business plan and write a lean canvas was a revelation. Sure. And so 100 Steps to Startup is our effort to break it down into the smallest pieces. Listen, I wish it was 10 steps to startup, because it would have been much faster. Because not only are there 100 steps, but I would say in 80 or 90 of those steps, there's also an exercise. Right. Because I can't assume you know what a lean canvas is. I can't assume you know what customer discovery scripts are. I can't assume, like they do in a valley, that someone's just going to show you how to put things together. Because I use this with undergrads, with grads, with first-time founders, with newcomers, with seniorpreneurs. It has to be easy enough for everybody to do. And so 100 Startup isn't anything different other than it's easier to understand. So we've taken the same things. How do you find a great idea? How do you then turn that idea into a problem set? How do you work with customers to turn that into a prototype? How do you work with that prototype to get it ready for sale? How do you choose price? How do you choose channels? When something goes wrong, how do you pivot back? So it's like a roadmap to startup success that applies to 99% of the startups. Because, like I say, pharmaceutical companies, startups aren't going to be lean. There's certain things you can't do. Take your test drug and just randomly test it on customers. It's not going to work. But for the majority of us, the side hustlers, the small business people, the startups who are still working to move to, to move to seven-figure streams, this applies. And so it starts with understanding customers and understanding customer segments and finding beachheads. And then it moves to working with your customers to identify what we call inelastic problems. A pair of shoes for $1,000, you wouldn't do, but if I cut off your air, you'd pay me $1,000 for it. So air is a better startup than $1,000 shoes. So we look at things about elasticity and about how that impacts people's value perception and what you can make with them. Obviously, you like to be things which can be charged a lot for, and how to choose that. And once we have a problem, we then look at what's in the market now and what's failing to satisfy the current needs, and re-envision it using what we call the 10x rule. So the 10x rule is simply, in order to disrupt incumbents, new entrants need to be exponentially disruptive. Now, in plain English, it means if you're going to knock out Blockbuster, Netflix has to be 10 times cheaper, faster, more convenient. You have to not be able to put on pants when you want to order a movie. You have to be able to not have to go to the store and find out it's out. Google can't be a little better than the librarians or an index. It has to be 100 times better. And so how do you take that problem set and turn it into an exponential solution? Because if you're going to try to move an incumbent like even Microsoft, right? Microsoft once owned the word processing market after it destroyed Corel WordPerfect, right? So then Google says, oh, you know what's better than a software for $299 a year? Free.
Yep.
And you know what's better? You don't need all the features that Word has. 90% of the users follow Pareto's principle that 20% of the features satisfies 80% of the users, right? So you can figure that out. And so when Google Docs started, well, it actually didn't start. It was a company called Write.ly, so Write.
Yeah, I remember that.
But when Write.ly was out and about, that was their thing. We're exponentially cheaper than Word. And we're in the cloud, and you can collaborate. But no, we don't have Helvetica font. No, our spell checker only has 10,000 words, not 100,000. Because no one cared.
Yep.
And so in that middle process of 100 steps to startup around phase 3 or phase 4, because they're broken into 7 phases, you're really trying to develop the concept of an online video store. And then you're building it. And by that point, you already have the target customers. You already have early adopters lined up, whether you've ever charged them or not. Like I say, we have people, our best portfolio companies are those that the people who use their prototypes won't give them back.
Yeah, interesting.
They're like, let me just buy the whole thing. And I'm telling you, they're literally like duct tape and code wrapped together. But you have something if people will settle for an ugly solution that works.
That's fair. Yeah, and the other thing too is I think that sometimes like designers and developers forget about is people really don't care how well it works as long as it does work, or if it's written in the trendiest languages or whatnot, right? And I've had that before. It's like, well, I really need to build this thing in this like cool new language. It's like, you know what? When the user hits that button, they don't really care all the cool technology behind that button. But if when they click that button, it better work, right?
So I totally agree, especially with inelastic problems like the air example. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't care where that air is coming from if you're not getting air.
Sure.
You don't care how much it cost or who produced it or where they stole it from. So when you have problems like I don't have any oxygen, then you will be more likely to adopt quicker and you'll be more likely to move forward. So I agree 100% with you.
Sure. So this is a little bit off topic, but I very much want your thoughts on this, and I think it kind of fits. What is your take on... And it's maybe a little controversial where people say, don't start something that you know nothing about. What's your kind of take on that? Do you agree, disagree, or does it really depend on the industry that you're trying to go into?
It depends.
Okay.
So the arguments for don't are very clear. You don't have any insight, you don't have any access, and you're not known in the industry, so you don't have any clout. And you don't know about the industry, so you don't have any domain knowledge. So I find it incredibly hard pressed to back companies in that space.
Okay.
But I have funded, the Ryerson Futures has funded a number of companies who weren't in the industries, but took such a disruptive approach. So I like to do half and half. If you're going to go after Walmart, I'd like you to work at Walmart for 5 years. And that's why we tell our undergrad students, don't graduate and go immediately to start your startup. Go and find an industry you love, work for a big player, watch opportunities they're missing, keep your eyes open for the one that's in elastic, and then quit and build the solution. You'll even know who's going to buy you in advance. So to me, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
When you are fresh to an industry, you see what could be. But when you're in an industry, you know why it's not that way.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's interesting because I've heard guys that are in, I don't know, like say a medical device space, and they've designed a million versions of some medical device. Sometimes they will hire somebody that knows nothing about the space to give them some sort of wild idea that might not even be buildable, but at least it inspires and they can kind of work together to create something, right? And so the tag team.
Well, it's more than that now.
Sure,
it's more
okay.
than that. We now know that by collaboration, by mashing up two different mindsets, a musician and an engineer, you get something new. If you do research in the Fortune 500s, you will see that there's a large number of them that actually employ science fiction writers. There's actually a service called Scout.ai that hires science fiction authors to figure out the future business sectors they could be in. So what does shipping look like if we have flying cars? Or what does the taxi industry look like if it's autonomous drivers? And they hire science fiction authors who are not limited by physics or engineering or technology, just like Star Trek wasn't limited by like what actually worked. They just had to make it look like it worked. But yet, look at your smartphone. Isn't that Captain Kirk's communicator plus some?
Basically, yeah.
Right? You know, look at the Fitbit. Isn't that just a version of a tricorder? I mean, I don't want to overplay the fact, but what you're saying is 100% true. I like people who have domain knowledge in the industry they're trying to attack. I like people who have a Rolodex, that they have easy access. All for having one or two of the founders just be totally from different mindset.
No, I 100% agree. I'm just always curious because you get kind of different takes from different people that have been through that. And I think it's also, though, you kind of need to figure out what works for you, right? Like I take little bits from, you know, what worked for this guy or girl or this company or whatnot, and then trial and error some of this stuff and kind of see what works. Obviously, there's theories and stuff that have worked and you should try to follow that some stuff, but not everything's going to work for you that's worked for somebody else. And I think that message kind of seems to get lost in some of the people I come across. Have you found that as well?
So let me tell you that there's actually a theory of stealing theories. So there's a theory we use in the book and in the 100 Steps to Startup called SWIPE. And it's not even a theory. It's just an acronym that we teach our companies. Steal with integrity and pride everywhere.
Sure. Well, Jobs had a big quote like that, right?
Yeah. Steal Netflix's revenue model and try to be the Netflix for comic books. Oh, wait, that's Comixology. Okay. The Netflix for audio. Oh, wait, that's Audible. Okay. The Netflix for immigrant TV, to sell to people who live in the U.S. who want TV shows from their home countries.
Sure.
You know, and you should steal ideas. You should constantly be watching how everyone else outside of your sector markets, tweets, creates virality, and steal with it. Do it with pride. Write a blog post about how you got this idea by stealing it from someone. Ideas aren't copyrightable. You're giving someone a compliment if you said, you inspired me to run a contest in my city because it worked for you. You do it with pride and integrity. Put the footnote on the bottom. Thanks to so-and-so for inspiring me to try this approach. There is nothing wrong with learning from people better than you. Just give them the credit. Just give them the credit for it. Don't be ashamed of it.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. And I think the best example that I try to go to, and maybe you might have a better one, is Apple didn't make the first MP3 player. Like, I remember it was creative. It didn't even hold one album. I had it with my, I ordered Adele and it came and I was like, whoa, this is awesome, but I can only carry 10 songs. I'm trying to think
of the name of the company. I'm trying to remember. I had it too. It was
Creative, wasn't it?
No, there was one before that. It was a little circle, a little yellow circle with an armband. I took it to the gym and I wore it like a badge of honor. And it had like 8 songs on it.
But right, so like I think one of the most successful products in history wasn't the first one, right? Like,
but I'm talking about even more than that. I'm
Okay.
talking about watch people do their HR. I'm talking about watch how people
Sure.
do their webpage. I
Sure.
swipe from my co-author Brad Feld every
Yeah.
day. I follow
Interesting.
him, and you know, he's so honest and open and transparent, you know, about his depression and other issues, that I've become open and honest about my issues. And I've really enjoyed it. And I give him that compliment. I don't do it like in some secret way, like I came up with the idea, but in
Sure.
everything. You want to be like Steve Jobs? Great. Take a habit he had. Try reading lots of books. Try doing X. Try doing Y. You know, mentorship is the one-on-one ongoing relationship between two or more individuals sharing and learning. But there's another way of learning that's called modeling. And modeling is, I want to be a great public speaker. So I'm going to go watch 100 hours of whoever I think is a great public speaker. Jack Kennedy, Tony Robbins, whoever you think it is.
Sure.
By doing that, you're modeling after them. You're not infringing on their trademark. You're complimenting them. And so if you're serious about doing what you're doing and you don't know how to do social marketing, then go find 3 people and stalk them. That's the best thing about the planet. The best person on social media might be in Glasgow, Scotland, but I can follow them from here and I can learn from them.
I love that.
I went to school for my PhD at the University of Glasgow, so I always want to give a shout out to my fellow scholars.
Sure. That's great. But Sean, sadly, we're coming to the end of the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so much fun, Kevin. I appreciate you listening.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy that you decided to do the show, but I really want you to mention where people can get the book at 100 steps to startup.com. I want you to kind of mention where people can get more information about yourself and everything you're kind of involved in, because it's all over.
Okay, I have
Just
a
Google
really, I have a really secret place. I call it, you ready? Wikipedia.
Okay. Interesting.
Wikipedia. No, the truth is, you can Google me. Sean is SEAN space WISE, Dr. Wise, if you remember the superhero villain joke. You can get my books on Amazon and all bookstores around the world. 100 steps to startup.com is the website for 100 steps to startup. My email is publicly on the net. If you have a question, if there's something we touched upon that I can help you with. It takes me a long time, but I try to get through all emails within a 24-hour period. I really appreciate the opportunity. You know, you say I chose to come on, but anytime I can share some of the things I've learned and help other people is a real blessing. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks again for doing it. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we can do another one of these someday.
Anytime you want.
Thanks, man. Have a good rest of your day.
Be well.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Also check us out on Facebook at Building the Future Show and follow us on Twitter at Building Show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.